Welcome back, fiber friends, to yet another episode of the Wool to Gold podcast. If you're new here, my name is Brian. I am your host. I make yarn. I talk about yarn. We answer questions about making yarn, all sorts of things. I love all sorts of fiber crafts. I'm definitely getting along in my hand sewing journey. I have some finished objects I'm going to show you guys a little bit later. Besides being a spinner and making my own yarn, I also really enjoy crocheting said yarn into beautiful finished objects. And I very recently opened my own shop where I sell just a little bit of my hand spun and just a few of my finished objects. So I'll show you a few of those things, again, a little bit later on. But first things first, we're going to talk about what the subject of this video is, which is what my fiber goals for 2024 are. I see a lot of people making, knitting goals for 2024, crochet goals for 2024. I find that when I pick very hyper-specific projects or even just hyper-specific goals, I tend not to actually follow through on those goals. So last year, I didn't have like a New Year's resolution. It was more, I made the decision that over the course of a year, I would try to get a little bit more into art. Before getting into spinning, I really didn't consider myself a very artistic person. So what I did is I got myself a year membership to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Highly recommend if you're going to visit the Met over the course of a year, a few times. It's a worthwhile investment. I won't credit that to being the reason that I started spinning, but I do think that somehow, weirdly, it's all connected because now I ended up here and I consider myself an artist, which is not where I thought as far along as I would be by the year 2024. So anyway, these are going to be my sort of like general goals for 2024 in terms of fiber. But before we get to all of that, we're going to talk about WIPs, we're going to talk about finished objects, and we're also going to talk about acquisitions. And I'm going to spill the tea on some of my feelings about acquisitions and my stash. A little bit about me. I don't have an enormous stash, and sometimes I get a little bit of anxiety and I get a little overwhelmed when my stash gets too big. But as I mentioned before, recently I opened a small business and I'm using more yarn than ever, and I'm needing to have a little bit more of a backlog, a ready supply. I'm getting tired of having to order yarn or go to the yarn store every single time I need yarn for a project, and that was just where I was at. So we have some acquisitions that we purchased, and we'll talk about some feelings in regards to stash and just my feelings and my struggles with being okay with purchasing like supplies for myself and nicer supplies for myself, especially now that I have just a little bit more money coming in that I can specifically dedicate to art supplies, kind of getting over that guilt. So we'll talk a little bit about that too today. But let's start with WIPs, because that's really going to be the smallest section that we have here. So I really only have 3 WIPs, and 2 of those WIPs you guys are probably pretty familiar with, and one of them is not new. The concept isn't new, but I'm going to bring you guys along on how my moss hood development has moved along. Okay, so the first WIP that we're starting with, I've shown this a lot. It is with the Noro Malvinas yarn in this like cool toned magenta, and then I also have the Sheepy Shires alpaca base in the colorway Plant Mom. That's what the green is gonna be. Sorry, that's the back. That is not the side that I necessarily want to show you guys. Is it the back? Maybe it's the front. I don't know. Honestly, it's been a really long time since I worked on this project. This is a finished object that I just know that I'm going to be wearing in the spring, and all of a sudden here in New Jersey where I live, we have had a cold snap. Today I am snowed in. It is the first blizzard of the season. I am working on the cuff in pink, a little bit of sort of crochet rib. And I haven't started the cuff on this one, but once that's done, and I attach those. I think the next step is really to work on the body of the sweater, which is honestly the part that I've been looking forward to the entire time, so I don't know really why I lost steam on this project. I think I just got distracted by other things, but that's okay because I don't have that many whips right now anyway, so we're just gonna leave this kind of in this bowl, safely packed away on the back burner for the time being, because the other 2 whips that I have, I'm a little bit more invested in right now. Alrighty, so next up for whips, we have these tabby mittens that I've been working on. They are very much a work in progress. I'm probably going to make another pair of these and then modify the pattern a little bit. But if I do end up doing that, you guys will probably get a tutorial on how to make these. If you want the specs on the yarn, this is going to be yarn from Solitude Wool. Not sponsored, but they are just like one of my favorite wools that you can get. I'm a big fan of them. I love Green Mountain Spinnery, but like, who doesn't? But this is going to be their Tunis wool. It is hand dyed. I'm pretty sure this is a 2-ply yarn, but it might be a 3-ply. And then I also have, in Tunis wool, marigold dye that was available last year at Maryland Sheep and Wool to honor the 50th anniversary of the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. Yeah, love this project. I know that I can crank out the rest of it like easy peasy lemon squeezy. As you can see, oh my god, I don't have a stitch marker on this because my life has been chaos lately. That's a metaphor for my life. Anyway, I have finished the cuff and I've started the next blue portion. So honestly, I could crank these out in probably a day. I might finish them after filming today. A man can dream, right? My last crochet whip that I have is, again, another iteration of the moss hood. I'm going to insert maybe a clip of it over here if I can. I made a TikTok video about like how I made it, but essentially this is just a yarn inspirations pattern. I will link the free yarn inspirations pattern below. Feel free to make your own fun decorated hood. The base design is really simple. It's literally all half double crochets. Essentially you make just a tube and then you make a hood. You can add a drawstring, but if you find this portion of it complicated, you can always remove this extra bit. As you can see, I actually have a stitch marker on this one, not living on the edge. But I really like this base design, and what my plan is to take these two. I have these 2 tiramisu cakes from Barreco. So tiramisu is a really interesting blend. It's 38% wool, 28% acrylic, 23% mohair, 11% silk. They recommend a 4.5 or 5 millimeter hook, so I'm probably going to size down because I'll explain why in just a moment. But these little cakes are 50 grams each, 137 yards. I have it in this really, really beautiful like ocean blue. As you can see, it has a halo, it has shine, it kind of has everything. And then I also have it in this really stunning green. I'm kind of sad because I used some of the green in a project that just did not work out. However, what I'm planning on doing is crocheting either like kind of like anemone-like or lichen-like structures onto the outside of the hood. Now, my hopes is by using a different material and not using something as dense as pom-poms like I did with the moss hood, that I can get a little bit more structural integrity, and like I want the pieces to kind of stay up a little bit better, and I'm hoping that the hood will hold up to that weight a little bit better. The original hood is made in a way that I feel like it can hold up a fair amount of weight without any extra help or anything like that. But I'm really excited to finally get to use these. I love Barreco's like kind of more interesting blends like this. I pick them up and I feel like I always am like, oh, why did I do that? Like, I don't know what I'm going to use them for. And then things like this always present themselves. I'm very excited about this project. Hopefully this will be done the next time you see it. Think like axolotl vibes. That's kind of what we're going for here, but like with more of like a fairy forest twist to it. So unfortunately, the audio here was just not super quality, but I did still want to show you some of the mini skeins that I've been working on that were whips this week. So right here we have some green Teeswater locks, also spun up with a little bit of a green art bat. The spin that we have here is super textured. It has some of my own recycled materials in it, but it's mostly a art bat that I got from Nouveau. It's one of her art bat D-stashes. Really pleased with the way this one came out. I think I'm going to call it Puck the Fae. And then we also have this lovely 2-ply that I spun up. So I'm pretty sure this is going to clock in probably light fingering, almost lace weight. It's a 2-ply. It's mostly this blue sari silk blended with white alpaca, but there is also some white alpaca blended with magenta sari silk, as you can see right here. So next up is finished objects, which is always super exciting. So I'm pretty sure like 50% of these items, at least, you guys haven't seen yet. Some of them I might have shown off before. So this is just going to be all of the stuff that ended up in my yarn drop / crochet drop. One item that I know for sure that you guys haven't seen is the Eat Market bag. So first, I know I shouldn't start with this, but I am going to start with the tag. You might be asking, how exciting can a tag possibly be? But it says, good things take time, and it has the washing instructions on the back. I hand sewed, I don't know, the sewist, can you tell me in the comments? What's the proper way to say that? I have some hand-sewn tags in the crochet items that I most recently put up in my shop, which is super exciting. And I got those tags from Knit Folk. I'll put her information on the screen and I'll tag her below. So this is the Eat Market bag. I used all recycled and upcycled materials to make this. So the handle is made from upcycled sari silk. The base is recycled cotton, and all of this sort of like embellishment, all of these little flowers, and if you look closely, you'll see there's some bows in there too, that all of it spelled eat. That is all just scraps from mohair and alpaca projects that I've done. So I'm super proud of this. It did take a while, but I love it. I think it's lovely. So that is one finished object that I'm super proud of. Mostly that I got the tags actually sewn into these projects, like in time for the drop before I put them up on the website. That was just a really big accomplishment for me because hand sewing is usually so draining to me, but I actually had a lot of fun sewing these tags in, so probably because the tags are so cute. So also in this little box where I keep a lot of my like yarn drop yarn and items like super separate and sealed away in like a special container just so they stay like nice and clean and smelling like lilac satchels. So I have this drop spun skein that you guys have definitely seen before. This is all Blueface Leicester BFL. The name that I went for was cyanobacteria, because I just thought it was like kind of referential to the fact that I drop spun it. It's because drop spinning is just a really like old way to spin yarn. Next up, we have a little bit of East Frisian that I got from Wellspring Farms, and I believe they're located in North Carolina. And I blended it up with some blue and a little bit of green, as you can see, sari silk that I got from Hidden Pastures Fiber Farm here in New Jersey. I really love the sari silk bits that I got from them recently, and I really want to do more things with them, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Next up, we just had this lovely dark brown Beaulayers Orchard CVM skein that I spun. This is just really squishy, quintessential CVM. 64 grams. I didn't end up naming this one just because it's just 100% the breed. I don't know. When I have a heritage breed and I make a skein that is all just like one color from one sheep, I like to just let the sheep speak for itself, let the sheep be the name. Alright, so next box. I had more items and more yarn than in my last drop, and I plan on adding those little mini skeins to the drop as well, so keep an eye out for those. Alright, so next up, I think you guys might have seen these, so I'm not going to spend too much time explaining them. I have If All the Young Men Were Hairs on the Mountain. This is Farm Angora, CVM, and Merino. And I think this ended up being either like fingering or lace weight. Fingering sock, it's about 19 wraps per inch if you're curious. And then this one is Turtle Girl. Now there's Corriedale in this, there's a little bit of merino, there is BFL locks. So if you look closely, you can see there are some really beautiful locks incorporated. Alrighty, and just for like continuity's sake, full disclosure, I did take a break to wind a little bit of that yarn, which is why now these yarns are in cakes and I have room for both my bobbins on my lazy cake of the alpaca. So speaking of alpaca, another finished object that I have is this self-striping alpaca yarn. This is going to be white farm alpaca that's been blended with sari silk bits. One of them is a blue bits mix and the other is a pink. The pink really does read a little bit more magenta once it spins up, which I'm not mad about at all. I'm very pleased with this yarn. I absolutely love the halo, which I'm sure that you can see. And this was one of my larger spins of this drop. Another spin that I was really proud of, and one of the last, I think, yarns that I'm actually going to show you that's a finished object is Strawberry Cheesecake here. So she is just a really, really beautiful lock spin that is also featuring some white Polworth and silk and merino, so just super soft. The locks are Teeswater lamb, so they're also just super soft. This skein is dynamic, this skein is fun. I had a ton of fun spinning this, and you'll see that this kind of definitely inspired some of my acquisitions that I got this week. But last but not least, before we get to the acquisitions, we have one last finished object, and this is going to be the queer-coated cat hat. So this is an alpaca wool blend for the charcoal, and that is a commercial yarn. And then I have my hand spun, which is a Cheviot blend that I made myself. So the white is Cheviot, the rainbow bits are scraps, and if you look very closely, those little brown bits are wooden star beads. Both sides have the stripes on it. You can wear it either way. And this is another finished object that got some of my new tags. So these say, very slow fashion. And then the other side has the washing instructions and it says, so painfully slow. Super pleased with this item, really happy with the way it came out. People seem really excited, so I think I might make a few more hats where I do half commercial and half hand spun. Again, I don't do this full time. This is just a wonderful way to keep me in art supplies, and I really appreciate everybody's support. So that's all of our FOs. Now to the part that a lot of you might be waiting for, which is the acquisitions. So we have some fiber and we also have some yarn, and we're gonna chat a little bit about the need for stash. Alrighty, so the first of my acquisitions is going to be solely fiber. I took a little trip to Hidden Pastures Luxury Fiber Farm here in New Jersey. It is one of my favorite places. I'm so happy that I went because when I visited, I got to meet the lovely Wednesday. I'm gonna insert a photo of her here. Unfortunately, all I have is a photo because when I got to meet her, I was really trying to live in the moment and just enjoy getting to pet on this baby alpaca that was inside the house, as opposed to, you know, like just like whipping out my phone and trying to like, I don't know, make content out of the experience. So I got to meet little Wednesday. Her brother's name is Pugsley. If you are familiar with alpacas, you know that twin alpacas are super rare. And it's even rarer for both of them to survive. So Pugsley is the stronger twin and he lives outside, and Wednesday is the bottle baby and she lives inside. And when she gets into trouble, she goes into like this like literal child playpen. So when I walked in, I saw one of the owners, one of the farmers out in the field giving a tour, but I walked into the shop because I knew I would find either somebody inside there or she would eventually come inside and I could purchase my fiber. I wasn't too worried. I've been to Hidden Pastures before. They have yaks, they have alpacas, they have sheep, they just have everything wonderful there. They have Angora rabbits. And so I walked in, and lo and behold, two of the other farmers were inside with the fiber. So I went in and they were like, "Do you want to meet the baby?" And I thought it was going to be a human baby, right? Because I saw a human baby playpen, but then they picked up something that was like large and fuzzy out of there, and I was like, "Oh, that is not a child. That is not a human child, at least." And that was little baby Wednesday. She was so cute. I loved getting to meet her. It was an absolute delight. I love sourcing fiber from Hidden Pastures because it is super local to me, and I get to just like interact with these animals, and I see how happy they are, and I want to continue supporting this place existing because I can drive really whenever I want over there and just get my like fix of animals. Mind you, like alpacas, if you know alpacas, they can be a little skittish. Like they don't necessarily let me pet them like some other experiences, like when you go to Rhinebeck or when you go to Maryland Sheep and Wool, sometimes you can pet the alpaca, because a lot of the times the animals that they bring to those fiber festivals are like the friendlier, or like the what do they call them, the farm mascot. That's the word I'm looking for, the farm mascot of the breed. So one of the reasons that I wanted to go to Hidden Pastures is because they have a really, really good dyed lock selection. I shouldn't be giving away my resources because I don't really know anywhere else that has such a broad selection of different colors and types of locks available. And I got a lot of different kinds of locks, but the main reason I was going was for their mohair locks. Now I have one of the first mohair lock samples I ever bought from them. I've spun a lot of this, but I still have a good portion left because although some of the Hidden Pasture a lot of the Hidden Pasture bags I'm going to show you, they say approximately 2 ounces, but some of them are a lot more than 2 ounces. Like sometimes you get a lot more bang for your buck, which is another reason I like to go to the actual shop when I get the opportunity, as opposed to ordering online. But I have that privilege. So here are some dyed red and magenta mohair locks. These are freaking stunning. I'm sure you can tell because the lighting is a little bit nicer today due to the snow outside. They are just absolutely stunning. I am getting a little bit of a sniffly nose because I've been tossing these around. But again, this is one of the original mohair locks I got from them, and when I started spinning them, I was like, whoa, I need more of these before I run out. I purchased a lot of alpaca and different types of roving from them before, and teasewater locks. I had spun a lot of their teasewater locks, but I wasn't ready for the mohair to be just so exactly the way that I want mohair to be for like boucle and lock style spins. So obviously I had to pick up more of that. So we're gonna start with the mohair that I scooped up, and at checkout they were poking fun at me because of how much mohair I had. But I did want to start with one that I'm super duper excited about because the color is a little bit out of my comfort. However, I've been trying to get more comfortable with things like this, and I kind of have like a game plan that I'm throwing around, but I wanted to just let you see these beautiful orange mohair locks. Look at that. I also got some mohair in green and blue. I'm obsessed with the blue. I have like 8 different things that I want to do with these blue locks. Did I need more green locks? Probably not. But still, I wanted to pick them up. I was there, I might as well. I needed to do just a little bit of a restock. I'm not gonna lie, with these blue and green locks, these bags were like, honestly, approximately 2 ounces my butt. Like these are definitely 3 plus ounces. So you're definitely getting more, I think, than you paid for in certain cases, and there doesn't seem to be like a ton of science to it, but it is a fun perk. Like at worst you get exactly what you paid for, and at best you get more than what you paid for, which is wonderful. And then the last little bag of mohair that I got is a little bit more of a variegated blend. So the color is called Antique Strawberry, and I'm gonna try to open this up to the best of my ability. Here's one side of it, and here's another side. It is these beautiful pinks and golds and kind of these muted browns, like a camel brown, which I feel like I've just been obsessed with lately. I feel like it's been making its way sneakily into a lot of my yarns as of recent. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just noticing a trend, and I'm proud of myself because I feel like I'm becoming a little bit more adventurous with my color combinations and things like that. So on to the next largest section that we have our Teeswater locks. So first things first, I picked up 2 more of these like tied clumps. I've spun through the greens already. That's part of the green yarn that we have caked up over there. So I picked this up in blue and this really, again, stunning orange. I don't know exactly, like I have just some ideas kicking around for these orange locks and exactly what I'm gonna do with them. I just think, I don't know, as I play with the color, I'm becoming more and more comfortable incorporating it and seeing what I can do with it. I have some other really fun colors that I don't normally acquire either. So again, this is more Farm Teeswater locks. The color dye is called Cherry. It is red. However, if you look closely, there's also these really nice pinks, but these are super intense and beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to using, especially these, and just getting a little bit daring with my color schemes. The last bunch of Teeswater that I have is just a really funky grouping of colors. The dye job is called Mardi Gras, and I think that's super accurate. So look at those. I just love it. I don't know yet if I'm going to try to keep this all together and spin it together in one enormous beautiful skein, or if I'm going to end up like dissecting it. We'll see. If you have any suggestions for how you think I should tackle specifically the Mardi Gras locks, drop it in the comments. And then I lied. I thought I was out of Teeswater locks, and I'm not. This is not what I thought was in my lap. So there, I also picked up some just like purple Teeswater locks, just because, again, Hidden Pastures does purples really well, and I felt like I could use some of the more like neon pink purples in this in one project, and then keep the like really deep, dark, kind of moody purples for another project. All right, last few bags of wool. So this is going to come as no surprise to anyone. So these are Corriedale locks. I don't plan on spinning them as locks. I do plan on carding up this fiber, and I'm not going to take it all the way out of the bag, but I wanted you to be able to see it. I've been a real fan of getting like wool that has been dyed in the wool, dyed in the lock, and then I have to card it together myself. I'm really looking forward to the yarn that's going to result from this. I don't think I'm going to add any locks or anything like that, no texture. I think I'm just going to end up trying to spin like a 2-ply or a 3-ply with this. Stunning. If you saw what I got from Fossil Fibers, I got a similar sort of like dyed in the lock form of a Columbia cross fleece that I'm also looking forward to carding up. One of the reasons that I really got some of these like daring colors is that I do have plans this year to do a little bit more color study. I love doing the breed study, and again, I know this is like 2024 goals talk, so I'm not going to spend too much time on dwelling on this, but one of the reasons that I feel like I can justify getting so much wool and some really adventurous colors especially is because I really have all intentions this year of doing a little bit more color study than I did last year. This is one of my kind of like wild card items. I previously, I don't know why, I've just never really been called to Gotland. I know that's kind of blasphemy. I know I should have spun it earlier. I just haven't. Don't at me. Don't fire police me, all right? but we're going to. I have these really cool Gotland locks. They're from a Gotland on Hidden Pastures Farm named Leaf, which I just think is really cute. And I don't know if they have colorways. They don't. They're just mixed bags of dyed locks. This one has really just a really big variety. Some purples. I have a little bit of teal and gold. There are some greens in this one. This one's definitely like darker and moodier. It's mostly blues and purples and oranges. And I think this one I'm going to probably want to work with first. I'm going to see how a lock spin works out with this. I might just hand pick them apart and see how spinning from like that kind of cloud-esque setup works, because I kind of want to maintain some of the lock structure. Another thing that I'm really trying to work on this year, and again, not trying to get into the fiber goals too much, but I have a tendency to, a lot of the reason that my stash, at least originally, started as something that was like not super big is because I just always had this concern that I was going to end up kind of collecting like more fiber that I can use, yada yada yada. But in the year 2024, with the way that 2023 went, I am using a lot more fiber than I expected and working through a lot more of my stash than I expected, which is not something that I should complain about. I definitely have a just long-term goal of having a living stash, and I would like to continue that into 2024. But it can be really hard for me to actually justify like bringing more stash than I'm used to into my stash. I even have some empty boxes right now, and I just haven't filled them with yarn, which again, previously wasn't like an issue. It was just more of an inconvenience, but now there are projects that are popping into my head, and I want to make them, and I want to put them up in my shop, and I don't want to have to go shop around for yarn every single time that I have to like get into this. So I've been really trying to get over feeling guilty about like essentially buying art supplies, which is crazy, especially considering I started this shop so that I could help pay for art supplies in the first place, and now that I have the shop and it's actually working, it's actually paying for things, like I should probably invest more of that into art supplies. So I'm trying to get over that, and part of that has just been trying to get some new acquisitions lately. So there was the fiber. I do have plans to maybe do one other large-ish fiber order before Maryland sheep and wool, but it's really only one fiber source, and it's more than likely going to be from Paradise Fibers. I'm like 98% sure. I obviously haven't pulled the trigger yet, but if I do make that acquisition, you guys will be the first to know. And again, I don't really see myself picking up too much more until Maryland sheep and wool, especially when it comes to fleeces. But again, we're going to talk about 2024 goals in just a moment. Let's look at yarn acquisitions. So if you watched my yarn tour video, you know that I tossed my yarn collection fairly recently. And then on top of that, after I tossed my yarn stash, I actually went through, like, fulfilled some of the plans that I made during that stash tour. Who would have thought it? Again, pretty proud of myself for that, really excited, but that means that I need to fill some gaps that have been forming in my yarn stash for a while. I have a tendency definitely to use certain weights of yarn, and then very recently, just based on some requests from some of my followers, I have needed some slightly heavier weights of yarn than I'm used to having, and I don't have a lot of that in my collection. So I went to 2 yarn shops. They're fairly close to each other. There's about a 12-minute difference between them. They're not super duper local to me, but you know, local yarn shops, there's only so many of them, so I drove a little whiles away for them. One of them is the Stitchery, and it's a very well-known historical yarn shop. It's been around for, if I'm not mistaken, over 50 years. I got to meet the owner, Adam. He is super wonderful, just as knowledgeable and fun to talk to as all of the reviews of the shop would suggest. They did have a lot of really interesting yarns there, and I had a lot of fun just looking at all of the funky stuff they had. If I was in the market for a cotton yarn, I would definitely have picked up more in terms of summer fibers, but again, I have a little bit of a ban on bringing in summer fibers as of the time being. I just have enough summer fibers right now. So I'm going to start with what I got from the Stitchery. Alright, so if you are a long-term crocheter, long-term knitter, you definitely know Lamb's Pride. So I got these really cool variegated skeins. I thought they only made solid colors. I'm not super familiar with Lamb's Pride, but what I do know about them is really cool, so I've been meaning to pick up a skein of theirs, or a few different skeins of theirs. I liked that the variety that they had at the yarn shop was a little bit different than the other Lamb's Pride that I've seen in the past. So this is their bulky variety. It's 85% wool, 15% mohair, 125 yards per skein. Again, it's bulky weight. I have this really nice, I think it's called something fermented teal, I think, maybe. The actual name of it is washed off a little bit, and this name is called Cafe Au Lait for the brown. But I really love these. I have plans to maybe hold them with some hand spun yarn in a project, and those are the kinds of yarns that I was really looking for when I went in. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the only single ply yarn that I have. I don't normally keep my singles like just singles. I almost always ply my yarn. However, I've been wanting to experiment more with just using my singles in a finished crochet object, and so these will give me a great opportunity to do so. So the next yarn that I have here is going to come as a surprise to absolutely no one, especially in terms of reliable workhorse yarns that are also at a semi-affordable price point. I'm a huge fan of, is this just Cascade 220? It is. It's the Cascade 220 Heather series, to be specific. I'm not sure. I've never actually looked to see if the color name is on these or if it's just the color number. I'm pretty sure it's just the color number. That's okay. But I got it in this lovely forest green. Definitely what I would consider like two variations of Brian blue as well. Looking at them all together here, I actually might end up using them in a project together. I wasn't thinking that when I picked them up and when I was looking at them in the store, but you know when you're in a yarn shop and the lighting is just not it, and it's not the yarn shop's fault. A lot of them just don't have great natural lighting, but now that I'm looking at them here in natural light, they go together a lot more than I thought. But when I originally picked them up, I was kind of under the impression that I could use them separately for separate projects. Again, I really want to make some leg warmers, again, featuring like some funky hand spun yarn, but also featuring like a classic reliable yarn like this. A little bit about Cascade 220, it is 100% Peruvian wool. I think it's next to skin soft, but some people do feel that Peruvian wool has a little bit of a prickle factor, so do keep that in mind. I believe it's worsted weight, and it is let's see, 220 yards per skein, which not too shabby, not too shabby. As I mentioned, personally as a crocheter, the way I crochet, I don't eat up yarn, I think, as much as some other crocheters do. And last but not least, in terms of items that I got from the Stitchery, I did get these really, really cool buttons. I just like them. They have polka dots, they have spirals. I have plans to put them on a really plain cardigan, maybe, that I crochet, so this can be like the point of interest that kind of jazzes it up, that makes it Brian. And then last but not least, I have my yarn purchases from Yarn Diva. So this was another adorable local yarn shop. I went there on the recommendation of somebody who was at the Stitchery, and they were like, oh, do you know about the other yarn shop near here? And I was like, how close? And they were like, oh, it's a little over 10 minutes. It's right over the bridge. Obviously, I had to go and visit. So I had never been to Yarn Diva before. The owner of the Stitchery mentioned that they also had a really like eclectic and interesting collection of yarns, which was true. I really appreciate a yarn shop that doesn't just have the same old stuff over and over again, that maybe features like some local indie dyers as opposed to like the same big name indie dyers over and over again. Love to see it. They also had some just like workhorse staples, which I'll show you those as well. So we are going to start with the one skein of yarn that is not a fuzzy yarn. And if you don't know what a fuzzy yarn is, or a brushed yarn, you'll see in just a moment. I'm about to show you. However, I did pick up this really beautiful skein of yarn. I know that I'm a sucker for, again, this kind of like driftwood like color. I just thought this would be a beautiful, simple accoutrement to a really fun art yarn hat that I've been thinking up. So this is shepherd's wool. It's from Stonehenge Fiber Mill, made in Michigan here in the US, which was part of the reason that I wanted to pick this up. It's worsted weight. The color name is Milk Chocolate. That is absolutely delightful. Very, very cute, very pretty, and very soft as well. I'm very excited to use this, and I might end up sourcing perhaps a lot more of this. I'd love to see what else this mill makes and produces. So as I mentioned, they also had some really old reliable brands. So I do have some of Barreco's Ariel here, which I have used before. I do think that the softness of Ariel does sometimes depend on the color. I've had my eyes on this particular shade of Ariel for a while. Now, if you're not familiar with Ariel, it's 65% mohair, 35% silk. It is lace weight, so I think this 25 gram ball clocks in at a whopping 284 yards. So I am a really big fan of their more intense colors, especially, and I've been eyeing this kind of like petrol teal color for a while. Seeing it in person definitely sold me. And then in terms of other super intense colors that I ended up getting, I have never gotten, Isager? I think it's Isager. Their silk mohair, it's made in Italy. It's 75% kid mohair, 25% silk. 25 gram ball, 212 meters. As you can see, I got this really beautiful maroon color. And then last but not least, I did pick up something that I've personally never seen before. So these are La Berlin. It is a Lana Grossa yarn, which I guess I have used Lana Grossa before. These are 50 grams each and 250 meters each. So these are the close-ups. Here are the yarns. Now I got this darker one, again, with the intention of maybe doing some like neat color work. This one, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. Frankly, I don't know at all what I'm going to do with it. However, I was enchanted with the little stripes of yellow and pink and lavender. This is not necessarily my color scheme, but I do think it's awful pretty. And I picked this up because it is a 40% alpaca, 25% wool, 25% polyamide, 6% tensile, and 4% cotton blend. So I thought that was interesting. I thought it was an interesting alternative to mohair. If I'm being honest too, if you know me, you know that something like this type of fuzzy lace weight, fingering weight yarn will not go to waste in my stash. As you may be able to surmise, fiber friends, it is the next day, so apologies. The household got a little loud yesterday. However, we are back and we are here to talk about my 2024 fiber goals. So first things first, if you saw my last video, you probably know what one of my first goals for 2024 is going to be, which is to continue my breed study efforts. I did a really good job last year spinning over 40 breeds. Which was really awesome to be able to like look back on and reflect on. I'd like to keep that energy going. I haven't necessarily done a great job in my first week of 2024, but I'm trying to be nice to myself and be easy on myself so that I actually keep up with the task. But I'd like to continue my breed study efforts, and in fact, I'd like to sort of expand my study to also include a color study. So previously, I have not been all that interested in really like sitting down and doing a color study and learning color theory, but I don't know what switch flipped. I don't know what it is, but all of a sudden I'd like to do a color study. I have more of an interest in it. I've found myself slowly collecting materials. This color study is going to include a in-depth study of white, black, gray, and brown. I do count those, and if you are familiar with spinning, you know that the way that each of those colors can affect other colors can be a little bit surprising. So that is something that we're going to add to things we're going to do more of in 2024. Next up, and another thing that's a little bit of a continuation of just a goal that I had for last year, which was to use a lot of my yarn reference books. I really would like to continue working through the Spinner's Book of Yarn Design by Sarah Anderson. I absolutely love this book, and if you follow along with Rachel Smith or the Woolen Spinning podcast, either here on YouTube or on really any podcast platform, if you don't follow along with Woolen Spinning, really, really awesome. One of my favorite spinning podcasts to listen to. There is such a backlog of information available too. I'm still working through episodes. I absolutely love that content. But this year on the Woolen Spinning podcast, or I guess over the next 2 years, they are going to be tackling all of the yarns in the Spinner's Book of Yarn Design. Now, I've spun a lot of the yarns out of here already, which is really wonderful, so I'm not going to be participating necessarily alongside them. However, I do have plans to continue working through a few more of these yarns, and I'd like to continue doing more beaded yarns as well. Speaking of resources for spinners, this year I did get a subscription to Ply Magazine. I did get my first issue here, which is going to be the sweater issue. Very excited. I haven't really had a chance to crack this open because of the holiday. However, I am really looking forward to it. And then the other thing that I treated myself to this Christmas was a subscription to the Ply Guild. So I have started diving into that information. It has been absolutely wonderful. Right off the bat, even in just the first few episodes, we're talking about subjects that I feel like I know a fair amount about, but I'm still learning new things, and I'm also learning new ways to present the information as a teacher, which I think is equally as important. As I continue looking through all of this content, I'll continue giving you guys my honest review, but so far, I'm extremely pleased with the Ply Spinners Guild, and I haven't even gotten farther than the first chapter. Now, again, because we're on the subject of resources for spinners, and just because I've gotten this question a lot on our TikTok lives recently, I did just want to suggest just a few other spinning podcasts that I like to listen to when I'm spinning and I'm not live with you guys chatting and answering questions. So one spinners podcast that I notoriously love is Sheep Spotting Podcast. It doesn't necessarily update as regularly as it used to, but it is a really wonderful resource nonetheless. And if you know nothing about yarn and you want to know everything about yarn in the shortest amount of time possible, if you listen to all the sheep spotting episodes, like the first episode to the very last one back to back, you'll be a yarn expert. I mean, it really does a wonderful job of very quickly giving you an understanding of a lot of different spinners' vocabulary. Another podcast I'm a really big fan of is going to be the Taylor Owen Thread to Men podcast. I am just a big Taylor Owen fan. I find her content very relaxing and enjoyable, and I just like her general perspective on things. Another little bit more casual podcast that, again, this one is not on YouTube, but it is available on most podcast platforms, is going to be Spin Control Podcast. And then last but not least, another just podcast that I don't believe is available on YouTube is going to be the Long Thread Media Podcast. I absolutely love all of these episodes. Each one really surprises me. I always learn something I didn't expect. And they interview some really, really interesting people as well. All right, going back to our goals for 2024. As I mentioned earlier, I would like to keep having a living stash. I think I did a really good job this year of both bulking up my very, very small stash and also using a lot of the yarn that was in that stash and keeping sort of a rotation going. Now, mind you, I am just like everybody else. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is where I'm not a purist. And again, I'm certainly not perfect. So there are some yarns that I purchased quite a while ago that I still haven't used. However, I have done a really wonderful job of working through, especially a lot of yarns that in the past, I think I would have let sort of lament in my stash because they were too perfect or too precious to me. So I've been really proud of my progress that I've made in that regard, and I would like to keep that sort of progress moving forward into 2024. Again, my long-term goal is to one day have a stash beyond life expectancy. I don't necessarily have the space for that right now, but again, I like these sort of habits that I'm forming, because if I am going to have a stash beyond life expectancy, I do think it's important that I throw that stash regularly and I'm aware of what's in it. These next two goals, again, I'm not really gonna have any like traditional like number type goals or like milestones that I'm trying to hit necessarily. They're kind of just like overall themes for the year. And one thing that I want to keep doing is keeping it weird, because frankly, I feel like my crochet style has finally started to like come into itself, and I want to like keep up with that. I just think the things that I'm making right now are way more interesting and dynamic than the stuff that I was making a few months ago, even though what I'm making is not necessarily like at all what like a lot of popular crochet artists are making right now. I don't know, I dig the style that I'm developing for myself. So I want to keep it weird, and I want to keep doing my own blends of yarns and fiber. I've really enjoyed messing around with certain fibers, certain wools specifically, that like a lot of the times they don't stay in the lock form like people process them, because they make a super soft yarn. But I've had a lot of fun playing with things like BFL locks in some softer yarn blends and things like that. Teeswater locks and Wensleydale locks and mohair are all lovely, but they each sort of have their own place and texture, and I really loved playing with all the different wool and lock breeds. And my last goal for 2024 is to really make an effort to get onto just a few shearing jobs if I can. Ideally, more than that, my dream is to really just jump headfirst into the world of shearing, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I have 2 classes lined up and coming up this spring that I'm super excited for, but yeah, that's my last goal for 2024, and I think we're gonna accomplish that one for sure. So thanks so much, Fiber Friends, for coming along for this episode of the Wool to Gold podcast. I know it's a shorter one, but I think I'm going to have a number of shorter episodes that I post during the month of January, so don't you worry. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and give me a like. And if you watched this far along, leave a comment below on what your favorite color is. I think the next episode that we do is going to talk a little bit about my color study and go a little bit more in depth into what that's going to look like. If you don't follow me on TikTok or Instagram, I'll put that information below and I'll link it below as well. And I hope everybody is having a wonderful new year. Go make something, and I'll see you on the next one, Fiber Friends.